Hi, I'm Bly, watercolor artist and mom of 6. My passions are people, paint, and petals. Please join me from my kitchen table where I teach you fun watercolor skills so that you can incorporate this creative hobby into your own busy life. Hi everybody! So today I'm going to show you how to do a really simple and loose painting of spring anemones, and these are such a pretty spring flower, really fresh and fun. So the first thing you're going to do is with a large round brush and just plain water, I'm going to make the bloom shape of my anemone. And this is just a large round circle, and so I'm not filling in the whole circle with water. I'm leaving a hole in the center like a donut of dry paper so that my center of the flower stays white. And now I'm dropping in some color. This is going to be a red anemone. And if you've ever seen a red anemone, they are so vibrant and really beautiful. So there's my red, and then I'm going to do another bloom to the lower right of that red one. And I think I'm going to make this one blue. So I'm going to do the same thing with the blue flower, just wetting the donut shape. And then I'm going to get my blue color, being sure to leave the center of my bloom dry so that the paint doesn't spread there. And I'm going to use this kind of periwinkle blue color and drop that in. And these little baby noises you're hearing, that's my 3.5-month-old. She's helping me do this. Helping. So there's my blue anemone. And I'm just going to try to keep the pigment mostly around the edges for some nice variety of lights and darks. And you can see this paint is a little bit different than the red, which just spreads so much. The blue, this doesn't spread quite as much. So I'm going to fill it in a little bit more here. Now I'm going to add like a purpley bloom kind of between these two on the right, and it's going to be tucked underneath the red and the blue. So just sort of almost a quarter view of it is going to be sticking out. And wetting again. And if I run into one of my other flowers, that is fine. I like that bleeding effect that you get. So I'm mixing a purple from a magenta and the blue that I used and a little bit of the red. And again, I'm just putting it on the edges and letting it bleed into towards the center of the flower. And you can see I've run into my red bloom and my blue bloom, but that doesn't really bother me. So I'm going to leave it. I might soak up a little bit of that red run there with a dry brush. So just dab your brush off on a paper towel until it's dry, and then you can soak up a wet area. That's a real easy way to fix a problem in your painting. So we're going to continue with a larger bloom opposite to the smaller purple one. And for this one, I'm going to try mixing up a more burgundy color. So I'm going to add a little bit of brown to my magenta and red. Mixing in a little bit more blue here, I think. Just more of a dark burgundy color to contrast with the smaller purple flower there. Yeah, I like that. So I'm putting this around the edges again, just like my other blooms. And we're doing all the flowers first so that we can allow them to fully dry before we go back in and do their centers. Because anemones have that really distinctive black center with um, the little stamens coming off of it. And so to really get that defined well, we need the rest of our paper to be dry. All right, so I'm going to put a bloom up here in the top right in a different orientation. So this bloom, you're going to be seeing the kind of a 3/4 view of it. It's going to be a little foreshortened. You're not looking at it straight on, in other words. So I wet my paper in about a half circle for the top half of the bloom, and then I just did a very narrow little wet line of petals at the bottom. So you'll be able to see this better as I add my colors. So you can see I've got like a fan shape of the bloom up top there, and then just a real narrow indication of petals on the bottom. And I put this periwinkle color in my other large blue bloom there. So now I'm going to make another bloom that's tucked underneath these two, and this is going to be another periwinkle color. And I'm just adding that into my wet shape again as before, and I'm going to let that one dry. And I think I want to add another bloom in a different view at the top. So for this bloom, I'm going to do the bloom seen from the side. So on this one, we're not going to be able to see the center of the flower. So I'm only seeing a side view of this one. And I think I will make this one red to tie in with my other red bloom there. So I'm still using the wet and wet technique where I wet the paper with plain water and then I drop in my color. And I like how that looks. So I'm going to do another bloom that you're only seeing from the side in red down here in the lower left corner. And this is mirroring kind of that top red bloom, and so it's providing some balance to my composition. All right, so after I get all of my flower heads in, I'm going to start working on the foliage. And the foliage of anemones is really distinctive. It's kind of frilly and lace-like. It's very delicate. And so I'm going to mix up a number of different greens that I'm going to use. I'm going to start with one green, and then as that dries and I get more foliage in, I'm going to add some yellow green and some more blue green to this. So for this bloom up here, I'm adding a stem, and anemones have like a thick tubular stem. It's interesting. It's like other spring flowers. It's got a stem like a ranunculus, kind of like a tulip. It's almost like it's like kind of like a straw in its tubular shape. So I've added stems to these top blooms, and now I'm going to add my frilly foliage here with just some real loose strokes of my brush, and I'm going to continue adding this type of foliage, trying to keep in mind balancing the amount of foliage and where I place it around the rest of my flowers. And then once I get this base foliage in, I'm going to come back in and give it some highlights with some yellow green and also some darker shadowy areas with more of a dark blue green. So this foliage is kind of fun because you can just make these small, short little strokes, and it's an interesting contrast between these big, lush flower heads and then this real delicate, um, frilly, lacy greenery around it. So I'm still just going back and forth, adding in, fixing in some places the foliage, and I need to add more around the bottom half of this picture. So I'm going to try for a little bit of a different green, I think. It's always nice to use a variety of what I would call shades of a color. So your green doesn't have to be exactly the same green in all of your leaves and stems. You know, even in the same painting, you want to give a variety of different greens. It will make your picture look more interesting. So I don't worry about trying to mix up the exact same color every time. I just mix up a new green and go with it. So I still need some more foliage in the lower right. And I'm going to put a stem on this bloom coming out of there. And then I need to get the rest of the areas where I'm going to put some foliage. And you see I'm not putting the greenery around the whole perimeter of the flowers. I'm just putting it in certain areas. I'm really just giving an indication of the greenery in the flowers. So that's my base greenery, and now I'm gonna try to mix up a yellow green to put in some places, and then also a darker green. So here's my yellow green. I'm going to try to keep my yellow green more in the top half of the painting, and then I'm going to put more of the darker green probably in the lower part of the painting. And I could probably fuss with this greenery all day, but I really want to keep it loose. The point here is to have fun, not to belabor it and overthink it and overwork it. So I'm adding more of this yellow green just to some of the foliage in this top area. And then I'm going to mix up a really dark green, and I think I always go for Prussian blue when I'm trying to mix a really dark green. And this is my Prussian blue right here. It's also really great color to use to make a black. So right now I'm mixing it with a brown color. Prussian blue and a earthy brown color make a really nice black. And I'm going to get a smaller brush and use this black to do the centers of my flower. So you can see I have a nice white space that I've saved in the middle of these blooms. And I'm not going to fill the entire thing with the black center. I'm going to leave a rim of that white around the black center. And then I'm going to put in these thin little stamen stems with a little bulb on the end of each. They look kind of like eyelashes to me. But that's really distinctive of the anemones. And it also stands out really well because we saved this little white band around that black center. So I'm going to continue to add these centers, and I'm going to have to keep mixing up my dark color here because I want it to be really, really dark. I don't want it to get watered down because I want it to contrast with the rest of my flower and the rest of the painting. So I'm going to mix up some more Prussian blue, mixing up another really dark black. And the nice thing about making your own black is that because it has more than one basically color in it, so my black in this picture is basically a blue and a brown, it gives it some extra depth, which is really nice. And also it gives you some more flexibility. You can put some variety in your neutral colors by mixing either a little more of the brown or maybe a little bit more of the blue. So on this bottom periwinkle flower, I'm showing only about half or maybe 3/4 of the center. And I'm going to do the same on this purple bloom. I'm going to kind of make it look like we're only seeing a 3/4 view of it by just putting in part of the center. And then same in this top periwinkle bloom. The center is going to be peeking out from the bottom of the bloom, and that lower edge of blue petals is going to be covering the other half of the center so that we're not seeing. All right, so it's really coming together now. Putting those centers in the flowers makes all the difference. And now I think all that's left is to go back and put some a little bit more definition into the leaves. So I'm going to mix my Prussian blue and one of my greens, and just with a light hand. I don't want to put the shadows everywhere. That kind of defeats the purpose of a shadow. Same for highlights. You can't put highlights on everything, otherwise it's not a highlight. With a light hand, I'm going to go into my foliage and put just a little bit of these shadows on it. And I like how that is making it pop a little bit more. And I like the variety now that I have in those green colors. So I have to keep mixing this color back up, kind of like I did with the black, because I want it to stay distinctly dark, so that it provides that nice contrast between the other shades that I have. And, you know, that's a really simple way to help you make your watercolors look more professional and sophisticated is to get distinctly dark shades, medium shades, and also the really light highlight shades. A good way to know if you've done this well is to squint. This is an old art school trick. You squint at your picture and you should be able to see those three different values: the really light, the medium, and then the really dark. So I am almost finished with this, I think, and I hope that you've enjoyed this lesson. Please share your work with me. I would love to see it. Absolutely love to see it. Stay well, and let's live to paint another day.